Time magazine called him the unsung hero behind the internet. CNN called him a father of the internet. President Bill Clinton called him one of the great minds of the information age. He has been voted history's greatest scientist of African descent. He is Philip Emeagwali. He's coming to Trinidad and Tobago to launch the 2008 Kwame Ture lecture series on Sunday, June 8th at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine, 5 p.m. The Emancipation Support Committee invites you to come and hear this inspirational mind address the theme, Crossing New Frontiers to Conquer Today's Challenges. This lecture is one you cannot afford to miss. Admission is free, so be there on Sunday, June 8th, 5 p.m. at the JFK Auditorium, UWI St. Augustine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Philip Emeagwali. Back in 1989, I was in the news headlines and described as the African supercomputer genius that won top US prize. I won that supercomputer prize for my contributions to the development of the computer. I won that prize because I challenged the orthodoxy of supercomputing only one thing or solving only one problem at a time, or solving the toughest problems in a step-by-step fashion. I was the first person to figure out how to massively parallel process across 1 million processors and how to solve a grand challenge problem and how to solve the most challenging problems across a new internet that is a new supercomputer, and how to solve the toughest problems at the fastest supercomputer speeds. I've had the experience of each student of an entire school writing a school report on my contributions to the development of the computer, and writing the school report a week before I visited their school. During my school visits, I advised the students that inventing a never-before-seen supercomputer is far more complicated than a science fair project. I explained to students that the fastest parallel supercomputer is defined across an ensemble of over 10 million processors that occupies the space of a soccer field. The fastest supercomputer in the world costs more than the annual budget of the 40 poorest nations in the world. For that reason, it's impossible for a student or his entire school or sometimes country of origin to assemble or program a supercomputer. On February 1, 1922, parallel processing across a network of 64,000 human computers was published as a science fiction story. Back in 1958, the term parallel computer was first mentioned in the literature. Back in 1962, a 4-processor supercomputer was manufactured. At that time, harnessing the total computing power of 8 processors was perceived as the upper limit for all supercomputers. For 67 years, progress in the speed up of parallel supercomputers stopped. Paradigm shifting advances in supercomputing stopped because it was then impossible to solve a grand challenge problem and solve the problem by dividing the problem into a million or a billion smaller problems and then parallel supercomputing that grand challenge problem across a large ensemble of as many tightly coupled commodity off-the-shelf processors. That barrier against parallel processing lasted for 67 years and gave rise to the saying that parallel supercomputing is a beautiful theory that lacked an experimental confirmation. Put differently, the practical parallel supercomputer was a grand challenge, a science fiction, an idea that was not positively true. Solving real-world problems, such as forecasting the weather and doing so across millions of processors, was science fiction back in the 1980s and earlier. In a historic debate that occurred at a computer conference in Silicon Valley, California, and occurred back in April 18 to 20, 1967, Gene Amdahl, the IBM supercomputer czar of Amdahl's laws fame, defeated Daniel Slotnick. Gene Amdahl's victory gave rise to the ubiquitous supercomputer term called Amdahl's law. In plain language, Amdahl's law decreed that parallel supercomputing will forever remain a huge waste of everybody's time. Fast forward 22 years after Amdahl's law entered into supercomputer textbooks, I was in the news headlines because I discovered on July 4, 1989, that the supercomputer textbooks were wrong and that parallel supercomputing is not a waste of time. The new parallel supercomputer knowledge that I discovered is codified into every supercomputer that has been manufactured since 1989. In the fastest computing or supercomputing of 1989 and later, a large ensemble of processors are harnessed and used to solve real-world problems and do so in parallel. Prior to my discovery of practical parallel supercomputing, processors that were not a member of an ensemble of processors were harnessed and used to solve only one real-world problem at a time. After my discovery, parallel supercomputing became the paradigm-shifting technology that changed the way we look at the supercomputer. The supercomputer costs the budget of a small nation and has an impact on the world that is in proportion to its cost. The invention of the parallel supercomputer was the culmination of a 7-decade-long journey that began as a science fiction story. That quest for the fastest supercomputer ended when I discovered how to solve in parallel one of the toughest problems arising in physics and mathematics. That science fiction that was first published on February 1, 1922, became a non-fiction during my parallel processing laboratory experiment that ended on my eureka moment of 8:15 in the morning of the 4th of July, 1989, in Los Alamos, New Mexico, United States. Looking across millions of years of evolution, working together to solve a grand challenge problem is nothing new in the animal kingdom, where lions hunt in packs to kill an adult elephant. But solving the toughest problems arising at the crossroad, where physics, algebra, and calculus, and computing met, and solving them across a new internet brought authority and clarity, that ushered a supercomputer that was never seen before, and that made the news headlines, and that elevated the massively parallel supercomputer from fiction to non-fiction.
Insightful and brilliant lecture.